the shadowy alleys of Noir to the twisting corridors of mystery, Detectives and Dice brings you thrilling tales of tabletop intrigue. Grab your fedora, roll the dice, and sharpen your wits, because in this game, the clues are hidden and danger lurks around every corner. Tune in now for a new case, and maybe a few surprises along the way.
All right, so you want to dive into the world of the big crime, right? You've got the rule book, some online chatter about it, and a couple reviews. A pretty solid stack of info.
But you don't want to wade through pages and pages.
Right.
You want the good stuff.
Exactly. The juicy bits.
Yeah. Like, is this game even worth my time?
And that's what we're here for.
This game is laser focused on one very specific thing, delivering a true film noir experience.
Okay.
Not just some generic detective game, you know? This is all about those gritty, morally ambiguous tales set in a city steeped in shadows and secrets.
Yeah, flipping through the rulebook, you get those classic noir vibes instantly. Rain-slick streets, dimly lit alleys.
Characters always one step away from crossing a line.
Yeah, totally. It's like stepping into a black and white movie.
But you're holding the script.
But you're holding the script. I like that. So it's more than just a visual aesthetic, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. The game really delves into the heart of film noir storytelling. Twisting plots, unexpected bursts of violence, and characters who constantly keep you guessing. Like, what are their motives? It's a world where even the city itself feels like a character.
Oh.
Breeding ground for corruption and danger.
And they highlight this fascinating contrast, right, between the city and the countryside.
Yeah.
Like this idea that the countryside represents some kind of purity, like an escape from the darkness of the urban sprawl.
Yeah.
But, as we know from those classic films, trouble has a way of following you wherever you go, even to those seemingly idyllic rural settings.
Oh, for sure. That juxtaposition is key to the genre, right?
Yeah.
Creates a sense of inevitable doom. This feeling that you can't truly escape the consequences of your actions, no matter how far you run.
Oh, man, that's heavy. Okay, so we've got the mood, we've got the setting.
Yeah.
But how does it actually play?
How does it play?
Yeah.
Well, the mechanics are surprisingly straightforward.
Yep.
You have 4 core abilities: body, finesse, smarts, and spirit. Think of them as the foundation of your character. They represent their strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
What makes it interesting is the use of aspects, which are like specialized skills. They give your character an edge.
Give me an example.
Like, for example, you might have an aspect for driving or shooting or even knowledge.
Ah, okay.
And with knowledge, you could specialize even further. You could be a doctor, a mechanic, or even an expert on, say, antique weaponry.
Oh, I could see that being super useful in a detective story.
Yeah.
Like imagine your character is called to a crime scene,
Uh-huh.
and thanks to their knowledge aspect and their specialization in antique firearms, they can identify the murder weapon. Like that's a rare 19th century revolver.
Talk about a clue.
Talk about a clue.
Right, adds so much depth and flavor to the characters.
Right.
And it allows for those aha moments. You know, the ones that make detective stories so compelling.
Totally, yeah.
But the real ingenuity lies in how the game handles actions.
Okay.
The core of any good role-playing session. And they have this really cool system for that. Essentially, you roll a pool of dice based on your relevant ability score and any applicable aspects.
Okay.
The more matching results you get, the better you succeed. Seems simple enough, right?
So far, yeah.
But then they introduce this really clever twist. The type of dice you use actually changes as the story progresses.
What?
So like in Act 1, you are rolling D10s, which means you have a pretty good chance of success. But in Act 2, the stakes get higher, the tension ramps up, you switch to D8s,
Yeah.
and then by Act 3, when everything's coming to a head, you're down to D6s.
Wow.
It's such a brilliant way to mirror the rising tension of a film noir plot.
It's like the game itself is pushing you towards that edge of your seat climax.
Exactly.
But hold on, there's more.
There's more.
The thing that really sets the big crime apart is this thing called the temptation mechanic.
Ah, yes.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting.
This is where things get interesting. Every character has 3 temptation tracks: guilt, desperation, and alienation. Okay.
As you can imagine, these reflect the morally gray areas that characters in film noir often find themselves in.
Right.
Let's say your character is tempted to plant evidence to frame a rival, or maybe they're considering withholding crucial information to protect someone they care about.
Ooh.
Those kinds of choices would earn them points on their temptation tracks.
So it's like the more your character succumbs to their darker impulses, the more they risk losing themselves in the shadows.
Precisely.
Okay.
And here's the catch. Those temptation points aren't just a measure of your character's descent. You can actually use them to gain an advantage in the game. You could spend a guilt point to get a bonus on a deception roll, for example, or maybe a desperation point to gain an extra action in a tense situation.
So it's this constant tug of war between staying true to your morals and using those temptations to your advantage.
Right.
It's a perfect reflection of those classic film noir dilemmas. Absolutely. And the game even allows for something called nixing a temptation track. This means your character essentially gives in completely to that particular temptation, letting it consume them. It's a risky move, but it can lead to some incredibly dramatic and unpredictable outcomes.
Yeah, it sounds like a kind of thing that could really shake things up at the table and lead to some truly memorable moments.
Yeah.
But how does this all tie back into actually running those classic detective stories? I mean, are there specific mechanics that support that style of gameplay?
That's where the chapter titled Search by Night comes in. It's essentially a framework for crafting those gripping detective stories.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So does it give you like pre-written mysteries or something?
Not exactly. Think of it more as a toolbox,
Yeah.
filled with techniques and prompts designed to guide you and the other players, through the process of uncovering clues, interrogating suspects, and piecing together the truth.
So it's more about setting the stage and giving you the tools to create your own unique mystery, rather than just handing you a prepackaged plot.
Precisely. And they've included this really cool section called Joe and Smitty, a search by night, which basically walks you through a sample investigation.
Oh, I love when rulebooks do that. It's
Yeah.
like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So what kind of scenario do they use in the example?
Well, it starts with a seemingly simple case, a missing person. But as Joe and Smitty dig deeper, they uncover a web of deceit, corruption, and danger. Leads them down a very dark path.
Classic noir.
Classic noir.
But I'm curious, how does the game actually handle the investigation process?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not literally combing through a physical crime scene,
Right, it's all about imagination and collaboration. But the game provides a really structured way of approaching the investigation. You've got mechanics for gathering information, chasing leads, and even dealing with those unexpected twists and turns that always seem to pop up in these kinds of stories.
Like, for example, what if you're interrogating a witness and they suddenly clam up, refusing to reveal a crucial piece of information?
Yeah.
How would you handle that in the game?
That's where those core abilities and aspects come into play. Maybe your character uses their smarts and their interrogation aspect to try and persuade the witness.
Okay.
Or perhaps they rely on their finesse and their streetwise aspect to apply a little pressure. The possibilities are really open-ended, which I think is fantastic.
It definitely sounds like it encourages creative problem solving and role playing,
For sure.
which are always a plus in my book. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about those reviews you mentioned. What are people saying about The Big Crime?
Well, the reviews we have are quite positive, praising the game's mechanics, its overall commitment to the film noir genre. They seem particularly impressed with its ability to evoke the mood and atmosphere of those classic movies.
So it sounds like it really delivers on that promise of a truly immersive noir experience.
It does. The reviews also point to the game's focus on theme and storytelling, emphasizing that it's not just about solving a puzzle, it's about exploring those complex characters, their motivations, the choices they make in the face of difficult situations.
Which, let's face it, is what makes noir so compelling. It's not just about who done it. It's about why they did it and the moral compromises they made along the way.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, what kind of characters can you actually play in The Big Crime? I mean, obviously there are detectives, but are there other classic noir archetypes you can embody?
Absolutely. The rulebook delves into character creation in quite a bit of detail, offering a step-by-step process for designing your character, including choosing their shade.
Shade? I don't think we've talked about that yet.
Oh, right.
What's that all about?
It's essentially a measure of your character's morality, how close they are to the light or the darkness. It ranges from light gray, representing those characters who still cling to a sense of justice and virtue, to dark gray for those who are deeply enmeshed in the criminal underworld.
So you could have a character who's a morally upright detective, but you could also play a shady lawyer or a hardened criminal.
Exactly. And each shade comes with specific hooks, which are like personality traits or background elements that help define your character and their place in the world.
So like a light gray character might have a hook like haunted by the past,
Yeah,
while a dark gray character might have something like ruthless ambition or debts to pay.
you got it.
Yeah.
It's a really clever way to flesh out your character, give them a unique backstory, ensures that they fit within the established world of noir.
Yeah, I like that.
Mhm.
You mentioned something earlier about the game addressing gender roles in noir.
Yeah.
That caught my attention.
It's interesting. The rulebook acknowledges the complexities of representing women in a genre that often portrayed them in, let's say, less than progressive ways.
To put it mildly.
Right. But instead of shying away from it, the game encourages players to really think about the historical context and how those portrayals can be both problematic and, in a way, empowering.
So it's about being aware of those tropes and then deciding how you want to engage with them. You could play into them, subvert them, or even create characters who completely defy those expectations.
Exactly. It's about giving players the freedom to explore the complexities of the genre and its characters, but in a thoughtful and informed way.
That's a really refreshing approach. But I'm curious, how does the game handle those iconic noir settings? I mean, we've talked about the rain-soaked streets and the smoky backrooms, but what about specific locations like jazz clubs, gambling dens, or those sprawling mansions with secrets hidden within their walls?
The rulebook offers a wealth of information on creating evocative settings, using vivid descriptions, sensory details, and even camera angles.
Wait, camera angles, how do you translate that to a tabletop game?
It's all about perspective and guiding the player's imagination. The game encourages the director, which is what they call the game master, to describe a scene as if it were being filmed. Imagine a low-angle shot looking up at a shadowy figure, making them seem imposing and threatening. Or a high-angle shot on a character who's feeling vulnerable and exposed.
So it's like you're directing a film noir in your mind.
Yeah.
I love it. It adds this extra layer of cinematic flair to the whole experience.
Right. And they encourage the use of props and set dressing to really enhance the atmosphere.
Like what?
Think of a flickering neon sign, a ringing telephone in the dead of night, or a half-empty glass of whiskey reflecting the dim light.
Uh-huh.
These small details can speak volumes without ever saying a word.
It sounds like they put a lot of thought into creating a truly immersive experience.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what really matters is the gameplay, right?
Sure.
What's it actually like to sit down at the table, roll those dice, and step into the shoes of, say, a world-weary detective or a femme fatale with a hidden agenda?
That's where the real magic happens. When everyone's engaged, the story starts to unfold in ways you couldn't have anticipated. You start making decisions as your character, facing those moral dilemmas, and the lines between right and wrong begin to blur.
It's like you're not just playing a game anymore. You're living a story, experiencing it firsthand through your character's eyes.
Exactly. And remember that temptation mechanic we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, those choices you make, those temptations you give into, they can have a ripple effect on the entire story. Maybe you manage to frame that rival, but at what cost? Or perhaps you protect someone you love, but end up putting yourself in even greater danger.
It's all about those consequences, right?
Yeah.
And those consequences can be pretty dramatic, especially when you're dealing with those morally gray areas that noir is known for.
Absolutely. The rulebook emphasizes that the most compelling noir stories are the ones that delve into those human flaws. The struggles, the choices people make when they're backed into a corner. It's not always about happy endings. Sometimes it's about those bittersweet victories, those moments where you realize you've crossed a line you can't uncross.
It sounds incredibly immersive and thought-provoking. But are there any criticisms or drawbacks we should be aware of? I mean, no game is perfect, right?
True. Like any tool, it's only as effective as the people using it.
Right.
The game's focus on those noir tropes and conventions can be a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it provides a really clear framework, a shared understanding of the genre you're playing in.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it can feel a bit restrictive if you're looking for something more open-ended or experimental.
It's not necessarily a game for everyone.
Exactly. It's really geared towards those who genuinely love film noir, who appreciate its unique storytelling style, and who are eager to step into that world.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want to force someone who hates black and white movies to play a game designed to evoke that experience.
Precisely. But for those who are drawn to the shadows, who love those morally ambiguous tales of mystery and intrigue, well, The Big Crime seems like a must-have.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the rules, the characters, the setting, the storytelling potential. I'm starting to feel like an expert on The Big Crime myself.
You're getting there. But remember, the real experience comes from actually playing the game, from gathering a group of friends, creating those characters, and letting the story unfold organically.
You're absolutely right. That's where the true magic lies. And who knows, maybe we'll even see a Hollywood adaptation of one of those stories someday.
Stranger things have happened. But for now, I think we've given our listener a pretty good understanding of what The Big Crime has to offer.
We've taken them on a deep dive into the world of film noir role-playing, exploring the mechanics, the themes, and the unique elements that make this game stand out.
And if they're as intrigued as we are, well, there's only one thing left to do. Track down a copy of The Big Crime, gather some friends, and let the shadowy adventures begin.
Exactly. It's time to step into those rain-soaked streets, those smoky back rooms, and let those dice roll. Who knows what mysteries await?
Until next time, keep those trench coats buttoned up and those fedoras tilted low.
Stay safe out there in the shadows, and happy gaming.